Every day, thousands of people hit the road heading towards their dreams. But sometimes those dreams collide with a harsh reality. Auto accidents with 18-wheelers can change lives in an instant. That's why you need the experience and expertise of St. Martin & Bork. With over 50 years of experience, St. Martin & Bork have fought for justice for the victims of truck accidents.
If you've been in a wreck with an 18-wheeler, know your rights.
Call St. Martin & Bork today to schedule your free consultation.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Going Public. I'm your host, Keith Weissite, licensed clinical social worker with Terrebonne Home Care. Very glad you're joining us, however you may be joining us. We appreciate it very much. And always glad to have with us Mr. David Rabelais. Appreciate you joining us here.
I'm glad to be here, Keith. It's nice. It's a nice way to end your day.
I know that's right. Of course, David is the executive director of the Port of Terrebonne. And a lot of people know a little bit about the port, but maybe they don't understand necessarily the history of the port. Share with us a little bit about that history, well, very rich history that is.
All right. Well, the port was created in 1964. We have a 7-member commission. From 1964 to 2007, we were fully funded by Terrebonne Parish. Mm-hmm. 2008 to present, we funded by ourselves. We self-funded. Mm-hmm. Our jurisdiction includes all navigable waterways in Terrebonne Parish. In 1970, the property on Industrial Boulevard was purchased.
Right.
And since 2006, we've signed 20 leases. And we also have over $150 million in grants since 2006.
Wow.
So
that's a lot.
Yep. We keep our foot down the accelerator to try to keep it growing.
Right.
So we have a 7-member commission. Bill Purvis is our president. He's with Thomas C. Mm-hmm. Steve Crispino is our vice president. He's with South Louisiana Bank. Greg Landry, secretary treasurer. He's with Morrison Terrebonne Lumber.
Right.
Dan Davis, he's a member. He works for Olivier International. Mm-hmm. Jacob Brown, he works for Enterprise Marine. Joe Caldwell, Crosby Dredge, and John W. with Chet Morrison.
Okay. And so we're glad to be able to have those people. And they're very dedicated, very knowledgeable about what happens at the port, right?
Yes.
It's always nice to have those kind of board members.
Yeah, I mean, when you have a board like we have and you have industry people on the board, they help you a lot. You know, they understand what's going on. It makes it a lot easier to kind of navigate everything when you have people that understand it.
Right. And so there's several commissioner appointments as well, right?
Yes. Terrebonne Parish Council has 3 appointments.
Right.
Parish President has 2. SEIA has 1, and the Chamber has 1.
Okay. Very good. And again, it's just good for people to know that that's where those appointments come from.
Right. And they're 6-year terms.
Okay.
And there's no requirements on how many terms you can serve. We don't have that in our bylaws.
Okay.
So it works.
Yeah.
You know,
and that's a good thing because it's so dedicated and connected to the community.
Yes.
And those people.
And you get that knowledge of these people that when they're on the board, it gets better and better as they learn how the board operates. You learn them, and things happen a lot quicker, a lot easier. They bring ideas to me. I bounce ideas off of them, and
right.
It works.
I love it. Let's talk a little bit about what the port does.
All right. So our main focus is to fund ourselves, and
right.
So we lease property,
right?
And we also leverage funds against grants. So,
okay.
So there's many grants that we've gotten in the past. Some of them are very, very lucrative for us. Mm-hmm. Once we get them, we build the infrastructure, then we lease it back to the tenant, and the funds from the lease stay in the port, and we build additional infrastructure. So that's what's helped us grow.
Right, and all those monies stay right here.
Exactly. Keep up with state and federal legislation. Mm-hmm. We manage the agency maintenance, although it's a Corps obligation. You got to stay on them. You got to, I communicate with the project manager for the agency regularly so that we know where we have silting, where we don't. Mm-hmm. They do the hydro, so they can tell us right away where we deficient, and we go to Washington and we hound our legislators to keep the money coming to the Corps to do that maintenance.
Right.
And it's about anywhere from 6 to 8 million a year now to maintenance dredge.
And that's a Houma Navigational Canal.
Yes, correct.
And we focus on the maintenance, but it's a really big project with regards to deepening.
Exactly. So that's another thing that we're doing. We industry in the mid to late 90s were really screaming like Gulf Island. The big fabricators were screaming for a deeper channel.
Okay.
And you know, it affects their work, it affects the projects that they can get, affects the projects that you know, that they bid on. So they really needed that deeper channel, and so we started back in the 90s working on getting it deepened. Okay. The agency was authorized for construction in 1957.
Okay.
They completed it in 1962. It was a minus 15-foot depth commencing at the Intercoastal Waterway in Houma, southward approximately 40 miles to the Gulf of Mexico.
Okay.
Operation and maintenance of the agency is maintained by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and the Terrebonne Port Commission is the managing entity of the agency responsible for the ongoing operations, future developments, and expansion of waterborne industry along the Houma Navigation Canal.
And so, and again, what that means is that you guys are responsible for overseeing and managing that.
Correct.
They're providing the maintenance, but y'all oversee managing that.
Correct. I mean, the New Orleans district is the biggest district in the country.
Right.
And that's the district that we fall in for the Corps. And so they have their hands full all the time. And we, you know, so I work very well with the project manager. Been knowing him for a long time. And,
Right.
and we got it pretty much down to science now. But for a long time, it was tough, you know.
Right. It was hard to work with him. But again, you bring up some really good points. And what I want to do is take a little break. And when we come back, I want to talk about the importance of that Houma Navigational Canal.
Okay.
Because I don't know that people always understand, of all of our navigable waters, how important that one is.
It's extremely important, and I'm ready to talk about it.
And talk about how and why. Well, David, we always appreciate your time and certainly your expertise since 2005 and really being the executive director and bringing some of these issues to light and bringing so much work here. And that will do it for this particular aspect of what we're talking about. But we'll be right back right here on Going Public. Don't go anywhere.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by South Louisiana Bank. It's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough.
Hello and welcome back to this edition of Going Public. Again, your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker with Terrebonne Home Care. Very glad you're joining us. Very glad to have with us. Again, Mr. David Rabelais, we appreciate you being here.
I'm happy to be here, Keith.
All right. Of course, Executive Director Port of Terrebonne, as we're talking about the importance of the Houma Navigational Canal, got a little bit of the history, got a little bit about the importance of how we got to the point of who's managing and who's maintaining that. But let's talk about why it's so important for the Houma Navigational Canal and why we have to maintain and manage that so well.
Absolutely. Well, as you know, this whole region is a fabrication region, a marine fabrication and repair. We pioneered it since the early, 1930s, 1940s, when the oil and gas industry started coming alive, and our skill sets here with our people are second to none.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. So to get a vessel built or to get a vessel repaired, you got to come up 30 miles up the Houma Navigation Canal to the port. Okay, to the fabricators.
Right.
And that's why it's so critical as far as the depth, because it limits the vessels that can come in and leave. Mm-hmm. So it's our only means of transporting large manufacturing goods and access for vessels that service the U.S. Gulf of Mexico. The economy of this entire region consists of thousands of jobs, depends heavily on the agency, and is considered a critical energy infrastructure.
Right.
The River and Harbor Act of 1962 provided for federal maintenance, and it was initiated on November 27, 1964. This act was a mandate by Congress for the federal government to maintain the authorized depth of 15 feet.
Okay.
Okay.
And again, that's sometimes hard to do.
Exactly.
Because of the way that our waterways work and how so many things get kind of dumped here.
Right.
Right?
Right. And we don't get silt from the north, we get silt in the bay from east to west. So the last 10 to 12 miles of the channel right near the Gulf of Mexico is where it silts in. Okay. So, like I said earlier, the fabricators in this region were screaming and yelling in the late 90s to get a deeper channel. We were authorized for 15 feet, and that's basically our depth. So in 1997, as part of the Morganza to the Gulf Hurricane Protection Project study, the lock report determined the sill depth of the lock to be designed at a depth of 23 feet.
Oh.
Okay, that's the seal where the lock closes against at the bottom.
Right.
So you have to have 3 foot of clearance so boats can go over it without damaging it.
Right.
Okay. So in 1998, which was year 1 of the study, at the request of the Terrebonne Port Commission, the Houma Navigation Canal deepening reevaluation was started to evaluate the deepening of the agency to -20.
Right.
Okay. Year 3, so we skipped a couple of years, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers completed the preliminary evaluation, and it was determined that further federal participation was warranted based on the National Economic Development Benefits. It's just
Okay.
an acronym, something that they use.
Right.
All right. Year 11, 2009, which was year 11, okay, up until 2009, the agency deepening study was funded as part of the Morganza study due to the lock being part of the Morganza. In 2009, the Corps decided that the Houma Nav deepening study would no longer be funded under Morganza because of a key feature of the study, which was the lock and floodgate, and it wasn't yet federally authorized, so that we could not continue with the agency deepening study in that manner under the Morganza to the Gulf.
Gotcha.
So in November of 2011, which was year 13, the Corps suggested that DOTD take over the study under the guidelines of a Section 203 of the 1986 Word Bill. And DOTD had to enter into a memorandum of agreement with the Corps. The Corps suggested that in essence of time, DOTD had used a previously executed MOA, or Memorandum of Agreement, on a similar project template that the Corps had already approved. All right, so we figured we were going to be saving some time.
Right.
Well, 26 months later, okay, the MOA was signed. So we used the template like they wanted. We did everything, and it still took them 26 months to sign, just so the DOTD could study it under a Section 203.
Right.
In 2014, which is year 16, the Corps handed the study over to DOTD with assurance that the study was 98% complete. And so the DOTD initiated that Section 203.
And 3 years later.
In 2017, under DOTD's direction, the study has been moving forward. It was nowhere near 98% complete when the Corps handed it off to DOTD. And because the study had lasted so long, the Corps decided that they required the environmental impact study be updated with current information. So as you go down this long road that they send you on, they delay you, but then they make you do redo stuff that you did before because it expires.
Right.
Okay. And
hurry up and wait.
Yeah, and it also costs us an additional $250,000 to get that EIS updated.
Right.
And then in 2018, we were complete, and the study arrived in D.C. The ASA's office, which is Assistant Secretary of the Army, kept the study longer than they were authorized, was supposed to, so we missed the deadline for 2018. So the study was finally authorized in December of 2020.
Which is very important to mention is year 22. That's 22 years.
Exactly.
After
Exactly.
projection.
The initial effort, it took us 22 years to authorize it. So
And again, if we ever need to talk about what sometimes red tape will do, this is it.
exactly.
This is what red tape, and again, it's just one of those things where we need to be aware of that. But this is how we got to where we are.
That's how it is.
And so, unfortunately, where we are is up against another break. And so what we want to do is kind of continue to talk about the deepening project and the overview and how things have gotten authorized. So, David, thanks for sticking with us. We'll do that, right?
Yep.
All right, I appreciate it. All right, guys, well, we're going to continue to do that. We'll be right back right here on Going Public.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by Alford and Associates for all of your insurance needs. CIS, Cardiovascular Institute of the South, the highest quality cardiovascular care available. Barker Honda, the Barker family tradition of quality.
Hello, and welcome back to this edition of Going Public. Again, your host, Keith Whiteside, LCSW, joined by David Rabelais, Port of Commission. Very, very glad to have him, Port of Terrebonne here, Executive Director. So let's talk a little bit more about how this deepening of the Houma Navigational Canal and where we stand.
Okay. So in December 27th of 2020, it was authorized, finally. The initial construction of the dredge volume is going to be 7,500,000 cubic yards, and the total maintenance over 50 years, they calculated 63,718 cubic yards of material, which is a lot of material.
That is huge.
So the cost to deepen, it's kind of hard to see, but the cost to deepen is, the total cost is $254 million.
Okay.
The federal share is about 176 million, and the non-federal share is about 20 million.
Okay.
And then there's some mitigation and stuff that you got to do, and we also have to do what they call a local obligation. We have to lower the pipelines, and the right-of-ways, and all of that good stuff.
Right.
So that's what we're working on now. From Cocodrie to the Gulf of Mexico, which is the last 12 miles or so of the project, we found 13 pipelines.
Okay.
4 active that need relocation, 8 abandoned that need to be removed, and 1 active that does not need to be relocated.
Okay.
Okay. From the intercoastal going down to Cocodrie, we found 43 crossings. With various pipelines, electrical lines, water lines, sewer lines, all of that good stuff.
Right.
So we're still in evaluation mode on that, and you got to find them, then you got to probe them to check the depth.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So that's where we are. So it's a long drawn out process of finding the lines, probing them, getting the right-of-way documents, getting the permits, getting everything, and then we're right at the point now where we're starting to communicate with the pipeline companies, and of course they don't want to pay for it, and we don't want to pay for it, and the right-of-way agreements and the permit says that they got to pay for it, so so it's kind of a little
jousting,
and it's all good for good cause, Right. But that's where we are now with that. So if you go to the next slide, this is the port property on industrial.
Okay. Gotcha.
All right. The next slide. Okay, this is the property at the end of Dixon Road. You can see Dixon Road coming right down the center.
Right.
To the bottom of the page is the Houma Navigation Canal. To the right is Munson Slip. Go to the next slide. That's what we built there. That's the ship.
Wow.
That's about a couple $100 million facility.
Yeah, no kidding. That's very impressive, David.
Yeah, they got a couple pictures of it. You can look again.
Wow.
Okay, now this is the old building that we bought. It's a Dular, right by the Dular Bridge.
Okay.
And we bought this building out of bankruptcy court about 10, 11 years ago. And I go to the next slide. That's a picture of the back of the building.
You can see how it's abandoned there with all the grass and brush.
And then this is a before and after picture. It's our new office now, and we lease to Customs and ICE, and our office is in the front. So it's been a pretty good deal for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, you can go to the next slide. This is how Edison Schwess used to launch their vessels. It's called a side launch. They built them on this platform, and then the platform would hinge over, and the boat would slide off.
Wow.
That's how they'd launch them. Go to the next.
Not anymore.
This is where we built a dry dock with a grant.
Oh, okay.
And it's a 400-foot dry dock, and we lease it to them.
Okay.
So It's a monster. It's named the Christopher White after Roger White's son.
Okay, very nice.
Go to the next slide. Wow. This is a picture of the facility with the dry dock. They build the boats in the shed, and the shed doesn't look that big in this picture, but you can see the bow of a boat kind of coming out, and there's railroad tracks that go from the shed to the dry dock, and there's railroad tracks on the dry dock. So they roll it out onto the dry dock, then they sink it, and then they sail it out.
Wow.
Next slide.
And nice, easy ease into.
That's
Look
a
how
picture
big.
of that boat on the dry dock.
Right.
That boat went out to Alaska.
Huge.
Okay, go to the next
And
slide.
you have the next shot of it.
Yep.
Wow.
Out in Alaska. Beautiful boat. It's called the Orca.
Yeah. Going out to Alaska, that makes sense.
Next slide. This is how Thomas C. used to launch their boat.
Right.
Next slide. We built 2 dry docks for Thomas C. and we leased it to him. So
Yeah, very
next
good.
slide. This is a jacket Gulf Island was delivered. Next slide. Same jacket. Next slide. This is Thomas C.'s fish processor that they recently completed and delivered.
Wow. Very impressive.
Next slide. That's the jacket going through the Dulac pontoon bridge.
Wow.
So that's
Passing that down in Dulac.
That's the only pinch point we have.
And again, being able to do that with something that large, very impressive.
Exactly.
Takes a great deal of work, and
Exactly.
Port of Terrebonne is how we're able to do that.
Yep.
Very good. David, thank you for your time today. Very much
glad to be
appreciate
here.
it. All right. And that'll do it for this particular segment of Going Public, but don't go anywhere. A whole lot more right here on HTV.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by Terrebonne General Health System. Your health is our legacy. Rouse's, you're either local or you're not. Buick, the craft of modern luxury. St. Martin and Bork, know your rights.